The boring history for sleep, the rise and fall of the Mongol Postal Service. Section 1. You open your eyes to nothing and everything, just the vast Mongolian steppe, an endless ripple of grass beneath an ocean of sky. The wind brushes your face like a whisper from history, and there's not a single sound except the distant snort of a horse, the groan of leather, the creak of a cart far, far off. This is where it begins. Not in a city, not in a palace, but here in the open wild. No walls, no clocks, no borders. Only motion, instinct, and the quiet pull of the horizon. You are here before it all begins, standing near a solitary figure, Temujin, the man who will become Genghis Khan. There's no throne beneath him, just the ground, the open earth. But there's a kind of electricity in the air when he moves. He is thinking, always thinking, and what he's thinking about isn't just conquest. It's movement, it's messages, it's how to keep what he wins from slipping through his fingers. Not just armies, not just horses, but something quieter, more invisible. The spine of an empire made of information. As you ride behind him, the landscape rolls on and on. Rivers cut their lazy silver lines across the grasslands. Herds of horses shift like smoke, and every so often he stops and looks out. Not at what's there, but at what could be. He already knows the battles will come. What he wants to build is what holds them together after the fighting is done. You drift beside his early campaigns, raids, alliances, betrayals, always a step ahead, always in motion. But watch closely. Amid the chaos of conquest, he's planting seeds, little decisions, messenger units embedded in his armies, couriers who travel faster than the main force, spreading commands like wildfire. They don't just carry messages, they carry control. It's subtle, but it's there, and it matters. In a world without phones, without wires, without even a decent road, speed is everything. And Genghis doesn't just want speed, he wants repeatable, reliable speed. He wants to know that when he sends an order from one side of his growing domain, it will arrive intact, understood, and enforced. This is not a warlord's ambition, this is a system builder's dream. You float behind the first threads of what will become the yam. There is no grand announcement, no ribbon cutting. It begins with necessity. Armies can't function if their limbs don't talk to the brain. So he sends riders. Then he sets up stops, simple posts. Little more than a tent or a campfire at first, placed a day's ride apart. Then he makes sure the riders have fresh horses, then food, then backup, then rules. It builds quietly. Genghis doesn't sketch out blueprints. He adapts, learns, tightens the slack. He notices how long riders can go before fatigue dulls their memory. He notices which horses hold up best in which terrain. He listens when his commanders complain that messages came late, and every time he improves the line. And still, it's just the beginning. You ride through the wind and dust, crossing paths with traders, soldiers, and scouts. Each time you see someone carrying a scroll, a knot of cloth, a verbal order. You begin to understand. In this new empire, the fastest thing isn't a sword, it's a message. The most valuable thing isn't a jewel, it's information. Knowing who is where, what is needed, what is coming. At night, around the campfires, the elders speak of Genghis's ruthlessness, his tactics, his brilliance in battle. But what you notice more is how people talk about his plans, how he thinks further ahead than others, how he doesn't just conquer, he organizes. You drift to a high overlook. Below you, across the steppe, tiny dots begin to connect, riders moving between them, horses grazing at waypoints, simple shelters rising like islands in a sea of grass. The system is not finished, but the skeleton is forming, quietly, relentlessly. And it's not just military now. Civilian messengers begin to use the routes. Supplies move faster, news travels further. Control becomes less reactive, more proactive. You can feel it in the air, the subtle difference between chaos, held by force, and order, sustained by communication. By the time Genghis is ready to strike deeper into Central Asia and China, the system is strong enough to support him. And the genius is that it doesn't look like much. No shining towers, no arches. Just horses, camps, and the dull thud of hooves on dirt. But it works. Over and over again, it works. You look around one last time. The sun dips toward the western rim of the earth, casting long shadows from the yurts and lean-tos dotting the horizon. And just as the light fades, you see it. A rider changing horses, a blur of movement, then gone, carrying something you'll never read, but which might decide the fate of an entire city. It all starts here, on open ground, with one man who understood that to rule the land, you first have to rule its silence. Section 2. You ride again, the air colder now. The grassland is the same, but something's different in the way people move. There's a rhythm, a growing confidence. Beneath the surface hum of hoofbeats and tents being struck at dawn, there's the shape of something deeper forming. A machine without gears, powered by men and animals, driven by will and foresight. And at the center of it all, Genghis Khan. You travel closer this time, watching him not as a warlord, but as a strategist. He speaks little, but his questions cut like knives. How far can a man ride without forgetting the message? How many horses before the delay outweighs the gain? What's the punishment for a lie in a courier's mouth? You hear the words passed down through the ranks, not as commands, but as expectations. If you want to serve the Khan, you serve with clarity, with speed, and without excuse. You begin to notice how often he talks about movement. Not just armies, not just trade caravans, but ideas. His thoughts stretch across space like threads, pulling people into alignment. He does not see land as something to hoard. He sees it as something to connect. The Mongol army is mobile by design. No supply trains, no fortresses. They live on horseback, in motion, fed by the herds they carry, and that mobility is sacred. But Genghis knows it's not enough. The bigger his empire grows, the more it stretches. And what stretches snaps unless something holds it together. You sit in on one of his war councils, maps drawn on hide, rivers, roads, distant cities. The generals talk tactics. He listens, nods, then speaks softly. It will not matter if they do not hear our orders in time. No one argues. They've seen it. Entire battles turn on whether a rider arrived or didn't. The message is as sharp as the sword and twice as fast when delivered right. So he turns his mind fully to it. Not as a side project, not as an afterthought. He begins assigning his most trusted men to build and guard the system. The yam, they call it. It means checkpoint or station, a simple word for a massive idea. You picture it like a string of invisible pearls stretched across the steppes, each one a place where a rider can rest, refuel, and ride again. You follow one of the early architects of this system, a man named Ogedai, Genghis's son and a thinker in his own right. He sketches out distances, terrain maps, weather patterns. He calculates how often a horse needs replacing. He experiments with different saddles, different message containers, even different styles of memorization. It's not trial and error, it's trial and adaptation. Always better, always cleaner. But it's not just horses and maps, it's trust. The riders must be loyal, fast, and exact. The hosts at the stations must be honest, well-fed, and ready day or night. There are codes of conduct. There are punishments, swift and brutal, for abuse or failure. You drift past one outpost where a host was caught stealing supplies meant for riders. He's gone now, replaced. His yurt stands empty, a quiet warning. Genghis sets rules. No one, not even the wealthiest noble, may interfere with a messenger's passage. No one may claim the horses. No one may delay the route. If they do, the penalty is severe. You hear stories whispered near fires, an entire village punished because a local chieftain seized a relay horse for himself. The message never arrived. A city burned. Lesson learned. And yet there's discipline in the system, not terror. You watch as villagers along the route start to see the yam not as a burden, but as an honor. To host a station is to be part of something larger than oneself. It brings prestige, resources, safety. Because where the messages go, so too goes the Khan's protection. As the structure tightens, so does the sense of control. Genghis is no longer just reacting to events. He's shaping them, sometimes hundreds of miles away, with precision. A rebellion brews in one corner of the empire. A message is sent, reinforcements arrive, and the flames die before they catch. It's not flashy, it's not sung in poems, but it's power, silent and absolute. You drift along one stretch of the Yam from Karakoram eastward, the sun rising behind you. Every few miles, a station. Sometimes a stone marker, sometimes a wooden shelter, sometimes just a flag and a waiting groom. At each one, a fresh mount, a ready meal, and a clerk with a logbook carved on bamboo or leather. It works. Day after day, it works. And so the legend grows, not just of Genghis the Conqueror, but Genghis the Builder, the man who saw not just with his eyes, but with his future. You feel the ground shift beneath your feet. This is no longer just a series of victories. This is infrastructure. This is intent. This is the spine of empire. The riders, too, are changing. No longer just scouts or soldiers. Now they are messengers of the state, trained to memorize long passages, carry sealed scrolls, navigate blindfolded if need be. You follow one, just a boy, no older than 16. He's on his fourth leg of a 7-leg route. He has not slept in 30 hours. But he does not waver. He is not just carrying words, he is carrying continuity. You look back over the steppe. What once seemed infinite and blank is now threaded with motion. Horses gallop across hills, fires light up at stations, scrolls change hands like currency, and at the center of it all, Genghis stands quietly, not marveling, not boasting, just watching it all run. Section 3, the Yam begins, not with fanfare, but with a hoofprint pressed into wet earth. You are there, standing at the first official station, nothing more than a raised tent and a small corral built from wind-worn timber. A tired rider dismounts, hands off a tightly bound scroll, and slumps down to drink from a leather flask. No applause, no banners. Just the sound of a groom leading the next horse into place. Another man takes the scroll, another rider mounts. Within minutes, the message is back in motion. This is the essence of the Yam. It never stops. You walk along the edges of the first official routes. They snake across the land like arteries, following the contours of terrain, riverbanks, and old herding paths. The Mongols don't build straight roads. They follow logic, habit, survival. Where the animals walk, the riders follow. Where there's grass, there are horses. Where there are horses, there are messengers. At first, the network is small, routes linking military encampments and trade centers, designed to move critical intelligence. You drift with one of the early relay riders, his face wrapped in cloth to fight the sting of dust. He rides for hours, the scroll tied to his chest, head down, eyes locked on the path ahead. When he sees the smoke from the next station, he spurs the horse faster, already reaching for the release knot as he rides in. There's no conversation, just exchange and go. By Genghis Khan's decree, the entire empire is now obligated to support this system. Every 100 miles or so, a station is built, called an urtu. The responsibility to supply it, food, fodder, fresh mounts, falls to local communities, but the empire compensates them with grain, protection, and privilege. In a world where tribute often feels like robbery, the Yam feels like a contract. You step inside an early urtu. It's simple, wooden frame, felt lining, a fire pit, and a few straw-filled sleeping mats. In one corner, a small table holds seals, message pouches, and route logs. The host, a gaunt man with careful hands, records every arrival and departure with marks on a scroll of birch bark. He barely glances at you. Riders come, riders go. He is the still point in a spinning wheel. The riders, or Yamchi, are a breed apart. Recruited young, trained to endure pain, memorize orders, and navigate with uncanny precision. You follow them through windstorms, across frozen rivers, through starlit plains where wolves howl in the distance. There's no ceremony when they succeed, just another ride. But when they fail, the consequences are swift. Discipline holds the system together. Riders who abandon their routes face lashes, exile, or worse. Station hosts who mistreat messengers can be executed. But just as often, failure is met with repair. You witness a broken link, a bridge collapsed after a flood. Within days, the Khan's engineers arrive, repairing the span with logs and rope, restoring the flow like blood through a reopened vein. And yet, it's not just discipline. There's pride too. You sit with a rider one evening, the fire crackling low, He's no soldier, no noble, but he tells you of how he once carried a message that saved a city from siege. How a warning from the Khan arrived just in time because of him. He says it quietly, without boast. But his hands tremble slightly, not with fear, but with memory. The yam expands, section by section. New stations spring up across the Gobi, into the Tian Shan foothills, along the Amu Darya, deeper into the forests of Siberia. By now, it is more than a mail route. It is a living, breathing network. Some stations have blacksmiths, some have inns. The bigger ones have armories. Others, deep in dangerous territory, are guarded by Mongol patrols. And still, the messages flow. Not just military orders anymore. Now there are trade licenses, tax instructions, weather reports, crop assessments, royal decrees, prisoner records. The Mongol bureaucracy, once simple and nomadic, begins to grow sophisticated. You float over the scribes hunched in their tents, dipping brushes in ink, copying orders onto scrolls of silk, paper, or thin leather. Their script is tidy, purposeful, like the system it serves. You're surprised then to find the network has room for more than just state business. Religious leaders are granted passage. So are scholars. Occasionally, even entertainers or healers ride the routes under imperial protection. They carry tokens, small plaques called paisa, stamped with the Khan's authority. Anyone who bears one must be given food, shelter, and fresh horses. Abuse of the paisa system is rare, but when it happens, the penalties are legend. And so the yam becomes something more than just infrastructure. It becomes a symbol. To interrupt the yam is to defy the empire. To ride it is to be part of its heartbeat. And that heartbeat is steady, relentless, and faster than anything the world has seen before. You trace its growth like vines creeping across a wall. By the end of Genghis's reign, tens of thousands of horses are dedicated to the system. Thousands of stations stretch from Manchuria to the Caspian Sea. The whole thing seems impossible until you see it in motion. Then it seems inevitable. The great Khan does not live to see its final form, but he sets it in motion, and once in motion, it refuses to stop. Section 4. You rise before the sun, standing in the pre-dawn quiet of a relay station nestled against a rocky ridge. The fire has gone to embers, and the grooms are moving silently through the chill, brushing down horses, tightening saddles. There's no shouting, no rush, just rhythm, the kind that comes from knowing the routine will repeat again tomorrow and the day after, and again long after you're gone. This is where the yam lives and breathes, not in palaces, but in these relay points, scattered like bone joints across a continent-wide skeleton. As you walk, you feel the hard-packed earth worn smooth by hooves. You see racks of feed bins, harnesses hanging neatly, bundles of fuel stacked for quick fires. Everything here has one purpose: to keep the rider moving. The relay riders, the yamchi, work in shifts, but some push further. They're not supposed to. Fatigue dulls the mind and messages must be exact, but pride often drives them. You drift beside one such courier, a weathered man in his 30s, bent slightly from years of riding. He's just swapped mounts, and before the sweat has cooled on the first horse's back, he's already gone. The system is elegant in its simplicity. A courier rides a leg, usually between 25 and 40 kilometers, then stops at an urtu, where a fresh horse is waiting. The rider may rest, or if urgency demands, another rider takes the message and pushes forward. This means a dispatch from Karakoram can travel hundreds of kilometers in a day, twice or three times faster than any other system in the known world. You pause at a small station built into a forest clearing. It's rough, logs lashed together with rope, moss creeping between the gaps. The host greets the rider with practiced efficiency, oat mash for the horse, fermented mare's milk for the man, a few exchanged words, and then back on the trail. The transition takes minutes. This isn't hospitality, it's logistics. The horses are the heart of the yam, tough, short-legged Mongol ponies bred for endurance rather than speed. You run a hand along one's coarse mane, not graceful, not sleek, but nearly indestructible. These animals can survive on scrub grass and keep moving through snow, sand, or marsh. They are, in a way, more dependable than the men. You pass through station after station, each one a slight variation on the last. In the east, they're circular, felt-lined and low to the ground to resist the wind. In the mountains, they're built from stacked stone, heavy against the cold. In the south, they sprawl wide, shaded with cloth canopies to guard against the heat. Always adapted, always consistent. The more advanced posts include bunkhouses, food storage, message chests, and spare gear. A few are even staffed by small detachments of soldiers, especially in areas known for bandits. But even here, the mission remains clear. The rider must pass. You sit with one of the Urtu hosts, an elderly woman named Ujin. She's lived at this station for more than 20 years. She's seen riders come and go, empires rise and shift, but the scrolls keep moving. They never stop, she says, pouring a bowl of thin soup. Even in storms, even at night. There was once a rider who came through with a broken arm. Didn't dismount, just dropped the pouch and pointed. The riders carry no weapons unless assigned to dangerous terrain. Their best defense is their paisa, a metal badge bearing the Khan's seal. It commands respect and usually compliance. You notice that most villagers along the route are careful to step aside when a courier rides through. No one wants to be accused of interference. But not all messages are scrolls. Some are verbal, committed to memory. You watch a training session where a young boy recites a message 40 lines long, without a pause, under the cold gaze of a commander. This is essential when written materials would slow the transfer. And it means trust matters deeply. Only the most loyal and sharp-minded can serve as memory couriers. The system has flexibility too. Riders often carry multiple messages, some marked by urgency. Pouches are color-coded or marked with wax stamps to signify importance. Military, administrative, trade, diplomatic. At some Urtu, clerks are stationed to copy messages or forward duplicates. Even redundancy has its place here. A message too important to lose might be sent with 2 couriers on different routes. You travel west along one such path, watching as a message arrives at dusk, is copied, and departs in 2 directions before the moon rises. The original heads north toward the Kara-Irtish basin. The copy veers south toward Samarkand. 2 riders, 1 decision, no ceremony. It's not all clean, of course. You pass a broken station, its roof collapsed under winter snow, the feed bins empty. This one hasn't been used in months. A new route bypassed it, and the host family moved on. A few forgotten saddles lie buried under dust. The yam adapts, or it moves. Still, the reach grows. Every year, more territory, more stations. And yet, at its core, it remains the same. A man, a horse, a message, a stop. And then the rhythm begins again. The empire is not held together by steel alone. It's held by these links, dozens, then hundreds, then thousands, each one small, practical, and necessary. No city could be governed without them, no battle coordinated, no trade settled. The yam isn't just a courier line, it's the pulse of a continent-spanning body, and without it, the whole thing dies. And as you lie under a felt blanket at one of the relay posts, the fire low and the stars sharp overhead, you begin to understand. Greatness doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just rides past you at dawn, silent and determined, on a pony too tired to complain. Section 5, morning light slants through the tent flap as you watch a clerk sort through a pile of scrolls and sealed packets. The air smells of horse sweat, boiled milk, and faintly of beeswax. This is the administrative belly of the yam, and what you're seeing isn't improvisation, it's method. There's nothing random about the way a message is packed, marked, and dispatched. You realize now, speed is only half the battle, the other half is trust. The Mongol Empire doesn't just need messages to arrive fast, it needs them to arrive intact, unaltered, and undeniable. You settle in beside a junior scribe who's learning to roll scrolls in a very specific pattern. The inner edge of the scroll is looped and tied with red thread for military orders, black for taxes, blue for trade. These colors aren't arbitrary, they're a system of visual code, readable at a glance in dim light. Now comes the seal. A lump of wax or hardened clay is pressed over the knot, then stamped with an iron seal, usually bearing the personal insignia of the Khan, his generals, or a provincial governor. You watch as the clerk presses the seal into a thin disc of red wax. careful not to smear the impression. The wax cools in seconds, hardens in minutes. That seal must arrive unbroken. If it isn't, the rider answers for it. There are rumors about what happens to couriers who break seals. Some say exile, others say execution. But most don't want to find out. You hear of one rider who delivered a message with the wax slightly cracked. The message still intact, but the trust gone. He was reassigned to supply caravans the next day. No trial, no yelling, just demotion and silence. You sit beside another rider, a grizzled veteran who's retired into a clerk's post. He tells you how messages are also cross-referenced, some orally confirmed on arrival by memorized phrases, others logged at checkpoints with signature sticks, little wood slivers marked by station clerks. A full route log can sometimes contain 5 or 6 of these, a breadcrumb trail of proof that a message passed untouched. As the yam matures, the bureaucracy around it grows more confident, more precise. In major centers like Karakoram and Khan Balik, master scribes are assigned to oversee message integrity. They train their apprentices in calligraphy, formal phrasing, and document preservation. You watch one of these masters work. His brush movements are deliberate, almost meditative. The ink he uses is mixed fresh each morning, the paper treated with oils to prevent smearing. This isn't art, this is stability. And yet, not all messages are formal. Some come wrapped in cloth, others knotted into ropes with coded patterns, useful for messengers who don't read. The Mongols adapt message formats to fit the terrain, sometimes even resorting to carved sticks or knots like quipu. The priority is not uniformity, it's clarity. You travel next to a border station where documents are checked before crossing from one territory to another. A courier arrives, wind-burned and hoarse, scroll held tightly. The station guard doesn't touch it. Instead, he holds a small clay token next to the seal and nods. They match. The rider continues. This is the invisible ink of empire, codes and keys hidden in plain sight. The yam becomes so trusted that sealed messages begin to carry legal weight. If a dispatch arrives bearing the Khan's seal, it is as binding as if he stood there in person. You hear of entire tax policies enacted based on these scrolls, of marriages confirmed, of military campaigns launched, all on the back of ink and wax. You trail behind a diplomatic mission now, moving slowly but with undeniable authority. Their leader carries a heavy metal paisa, engraved in square script and bearing a stylized falcon, one of the great Khan's personal emblems. Wherever they ride, station hosts stand, bow, and deliver without question. This isn't just protocol, it's protection. The yam isn't just for couriers anymore, it's the official path of the state. But where there is trust, there is temptation. You sit in on a tribunal. A rider has been caught with a false seal, sloppily cast in tin, the shape wrong by a hair's breadth. He claims ignorance, says it was given to him by a superior. The judges don't raise their voices, they don't need to. The man is stripped of his paisa, exiled from the system. The message is clear, break the line and you're out. No redemption. To maintain faith, the yam establishes redundancy. Messages of extreme importance are sometimes sent with duplicates. One sealed, one oral, one mnemonic. You watch a test where the oral courier's story is compared to the scroll's content. Line for line, it matches. If it hadn't, the man would be reassigned to livestock duty. Again, no debate, just quiet consequences. Trust isn't just vertical, from the Khan down. It's horizontal between riders, clerks, hosts. Every person in the system must believe the others are doing their job, or the whole thing collapses. And so everyone watches everyone else, not with paranoia, but with vigilance. You feel it in the air at the stations, a kind of quiet pride that the system is bigger than them and worth preserving. You reach one of the highland posts at dusk, wind whipping over a ridge. The rider dismounts, hands the scroll over, and it disappears into the clerk's satchel. The seal is unbroken. The chain holds. You lie back against a rock, watching the stars prick through the blue. Somewhere, hundreds of miles away, a decision will be made based on that scroll. It will change nothing for the rider, and everything for someone else. The yam doesn't need to be flashy, it needs to be believed. Section 6. The sun rises behind you as you stand on the edge of a wide valley, watching a cluster of Mongol cavalry gallop in near-perfect formation. Their movements are smooth, their pace deliberate. But what you're here to witness isn't the charge, it's what comes before. Moments earlier, a rider peeled off from the ridge with a scroll tied to his chest, delivered it to the commander in the field, and vanished into the dust again. That single exchange, you realize, is what made the maneuver possible. Command and control. In a world this vast, scattered and fluid, it is the difference between victory and collapse. And the yam is the invisible thread that binds the empire's limbs to its brain. You follow the message trail backward now, from the front line to the general's tent, then to the supply depot beyond the hills, and then all the way to Karakoram. Every relay station along the way has done its job without hesitation. Riders prepped, horses rotated, messages recorded. The orders moved over 300 miles in 3 days. No one celebrates this, they just expect it. The Mongol military depends on this tempo. It is not the biggest army in the world, but it might be the fastest, the most reactive. You ride beside a scout who reports enemy troop positions by memory. He delivers that information to a courier who gallops with it not to a general, but to a relay station. From there, it travels faster than any single horse ever could. The yam allows this army to behave like a single organism. Messages can leap ahead of supply lines, shift units between fronts, cancel assaults, or summon reinforcements, all before the enemy even knows what's coming. You watch a campaign turn because a message rerouted a cavalry unit over a mountain pass. It arrived in time. Just barely. You visit a mobile command post, little more than a cluster of tents and supply carts. A senior officer is hunched over a map while a clerk reads off incoming dispatches. There's a rhythm to it. Receive, confirm, respond, send. You recognize the wax seals now, the symbols scratched in shorthand on the outer folds of the scrolls. The general gives only brief verbal commands, the scribes write them out, affix the seal, and the message is off again. This isn't a top-heavy system. Authority is distributed but tightly coordinated. Generals can act independently, but they're tethered to the Khan's long reach by the yam. It's a paradox. Decentralized action governed by centralized information. In the hands of lesser commanders, it would crumble, but the Mongols drill it into every rank. You move now with a supply caravan, slow, methodical, its destination shifting mid-route because of a yam dispatch. The oxen pull at a crawl, but the planning moves quickly. You overhear one merchant mutter, "It's like the Khan sees with 10 eyes." And in a way, he does. The yam is his vision, moving faster than any spy, more reliable than rumor. In cities under Mongol control, the system interfaces directly with governance. Governors receive reports on tax compliance, weather anomalies, potential unrest. When something flares, the message flies to the capital. Not months later, sometimes not even days. The efficiency is startling, especially in a world where most empires drown in lag. You spend a night in the tent of a military courier team, all of them scarred from previous campaigns. One jokes that he's just a horse that talks. But when they speak of the worst moments, the message that didn't arrive in time, the relay point that had been burned, you hear a different tone. These are not just messengers, they are part of the machine, and they know what happens when it sputters. Occasionally, even during active battles, short-distance relays are established. Temporary urtu, built hastily with canvas and rope, manned by reserves. You witness one being set up outside a city under siege. Riders loop back every hour, carrying updates to the rear. The siege lines shift in response. Supplies are allocated with near-clinical precision. And you understand, the yam doesn't end where the battlefield begins. It enters it. You're shown a sealed document marked in gold ink. One of the Khan's direct commands. These are rare, often triple verified. Riders carry them with armed escorts. To delay one of these messages is unthinkable. You ask how often they go astray. The officer stares at you. "Not once," he says, "not unless the world ends." There's a story about a battle that almost didn't happen. The Khan, misinformed, had nearly called off the siege of a city in the Hindu Kush. But a last-minute courier, galloping for days through storms, brought news that changed the order. The siege resumed. The city fell, history turned. You wonder about the couriers who didn't make it. No monuments mark their graves. They died in rivers, blizzards, ambushes. Some froze in saddles, some were buried in landslides, but the system continued. Not through replacement alone, but because the yam was bigger than any rider. And now, centuries later, as you stand in the ruins of a fortress once connected by these lines, you can still feel it. That old hum beneath the stone. The power of a message arriving exactly when it needed to. The quiet victory of a system that allowed a vast and scattered army to move like one. No banners, no horns, just a horse, a rider, a sealed scroll, and an empire that listened. Section 7. You move further west now, across shifting terrain and deepening distances. The yam, once just a chain of dusty relay posts on the steppes, has stretched outward like a growing vine, coiling through valleys, deserts, and foreign lands. As the Mongol Empire expands under Genghis's successors, the postal roads push with it, embedding themselves into unfamiliar landscapes, foreign cultures, and ancient cities that had never heard of the yam before. You arrive in Samarkand, the jewel of Central Asia, now under Mongol control. The city hums with trade and scholarship, and somewhere among the noise of marketplaces and mosques, a relay station has been tucked into the city's administrative quarter. The riders look out of place here, dusty, leather-clad, stoic against the backdrop of blue-tiled buildings and soft silks. But they're respected, feared even. The yam moves through Samarkand like it does through the grasslands, with silent authority. You follow a message eastward now, from Persia toward the heart of China. The relay lines here are older, more established, some following the ghost trails of old Silk Road routes. But where the Silk Road moved commerce, the yam moves control. The scroll you're tracking carries an update from a Mongol governor in Tabriz to the Yuan court in Khanbalik. You trace its journey, through deserts dotted with black tents, across snow-fed rivers, over winding mountain passes. At each checkpoint, the message doesn't slow. It's passed like a spark, leaping ahead of itself, always moving. The infrastructure becomes more advanced here. In settled regions like northern China, the stations grow larger. Some are walled compounds, with stables for a dozen horses, stocked pantries, and armed guards. The grooms here wear uniform robes, and the clerks carry lacquered writing boxes. You feel the administrative weight of the Yuan dynasty pressing into the system, the Mongol order fused with Chinese bureaucracy. It's no longer just a military nerve system, it's an empire's skeleton. You linger in Khanbalik, once Zhongdu, now the capital of the Yuan. The city is vast and geometric, pulsing with the ambition of Kublai Khan. The yam reaches its peak here. Inbound messages arrive from as far as Hungary and Baghdad, crossing thousands of kilometers over land. The couriers step into stone-walled halls now, handing scrolls not to rugged garrison captains, but to silk-robed officials in sunlit atriums. The language of the messages has changed, now rendered in Chinese, Persian, Uyghur, Mongolian, sometimes all at once. The content spans taxes, trade licenses, court gossip, rebellion alerts. Here, you understand the full scope of the system. The yam isn't a Mongol creation anymore. It's a Eurasian one, draped over an empire that spans 2 oceans and a dozen cultures. In Baghdad, the couriers wear long robes. In Crimea, they wear fur. In Yunnan, they ride through mist-cloaked forests where bamboo leans over narrow paths. But the scrolls, the seals, the paisa, they remain the same. You pass through Russian territories, Suzdal, Vladimir, down toward the Black Sea. Even here, the yam breathes. Local princes are expected to host stations, offer horses, supply food. Not everyone is happy about it. You pass a burned-out Urtu, blackened timbers still warm, rebellion flares sometimes. The system is an occupying force as much as a postal line. But more often than not, the stations are rebuilt. Because even resistance depends on information, and nothing moves faster than the yam. And as you travel further, you notice its growing influence on trade. Caravans begin to follow the routes laid out for the yam. Merchants seek out Urtu not for messages, but for protection and food. Soon, the system is doing more than carrying scrolls. It's shaping where people walk, where markets form, where towns are built. The arteries of the state have become the veins of commerce. You walk alongside a Persian trader who swears by the yam routes. Safer than the old trails, he says, and faster than going alone. He shows you his stamped permit, issued by a Mongol administrator, allowing him to lodge at relay stations for a small fee. He tells you the stations are cleaner than the inns, the horses better fed. Sometimes, he adds, you get a message before you even knew you needed one. It's not just people either. You see boxes of spices, bolts of silk, barrels of ink, and crates of medicinal herbs changing hands at the larger stations. Not officially, but predictably. The yam stations have become nexuses. Not quite markets, but not just military outposts either. When the state builds a spine, the world builds muscle around it. You stop one night at a highland yurtu near the Kazakh plateau. A Buddhist monk, a Persian scribe, and a Mongol courier share a meal. They don't speak the same language, but the system brought them to the same fire. You realize then, this isn't just a postal network. It's an empire of contact, of accidental meetings, of human drift. Each message moves with intent, but the system creates countless unintended consequences, ideas, habits, even friendships. And still it runs. From the Crimea to the Yellow Sea, from Siberia to the Indian borderlands. Through marsh, desert, and mountain, each post different, each rider alone, each horse worn thin. But the scroll always moves, and the empire watches, listens, and acts, because its messengers reach further than its armies ever could. Section 8. Dusk settles on the plains as you ride beside a merchant caravan crossing into central Mongolia. Their wagons creak, piled with textiles and dried fruit, but their pace is steady, not because they're fast, but because they're confident. The yam has brought peace, not the kind sealed with treaties or decrees, but the kind enforced by motion, communication, and presence. The empire is awake at every corner, connected, and for a time peaceful. This is the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace, and you're floating inside its quiet machinery. Trade flourishes now in ways unimaginable just a generation before. Because the yam doesn't only move commands, it moves trust. Goods, ideas, and travelers follow the same paths as messages. Drawn to the security of a network that works, you stop at a station east of Bukhara, where a local official shows you a ledger, not of military orders, but of merchant permits, transits, toll exemptions. They're recorded in 4 scripts, stamped with at least 3 different seals. The clerks here aren't just handling imperial scrolls, they're handling commerce. You share a meal with a spice trader from India, whose family has been moving goods along these roads for years. He tells you that without the yam, it would be madness. Too many unknowns, too many delays. But now he receives word when a pass is blocked, when a city is under quarantine, when the next market opens. It's like riding with your ears on the wind, he says. You continue on and begin to notice that some yam stations are doubling as border checks and customs outposts. Not officially, not by design, but when the infrastructure exists, the uses grow. You hear of taxes paid through the yam, permits carried upstream to the courts, then back down again as receipts. One official refers to it as a second spine. The first is the army. The second is this. But it's not just trade goods that move. You encounter a Franciscan friar from Italy traveling east with a Mongol escort. He carries a letter to the great Khan. He's part diplomat, part religious envoy, and all curiosity. He marvels at the yam, not just the speed of it, but its reliability. It's strange, he says. In Christendom, our letters move by grace. Here, they move by order. He isn't alone. You pass a group of Chinese engineers heading west to consult on irrigation in Persia. Later, you meet Persian astronomers on their way to the Yuan court. They've brought scrolls, lenses, and complex tools, loaded in neat boxes onto a mule train. They're traveling under official protection, and their papers bear the Khan's seal. You stop in a larger station in bulk, and the clerk there shows you something unusual. A small package wrapped in oiled silk. It's labeled in Persian script, but beneath it is a smaller Chinese annotation. Inside is a lump of lapis lazuli and a thin sliver of jade. Traded gifts, not messages. They're being sent not for value, but for display. The empire, you understand, has begun to trade with itself, using the yam as a gallery of its own diversity. It isn't all shiny and good. You ride alongside a caravan in the western steppe attacked by bandits. They don't go for the goods, they go for the message pouches. A sealed document with the right information is worth more than gold. You hear of incidents where stolen scrolls were used to mislead entire garrisons. It's rare, but it happens. To combat this, the empire strengthens the Paisa system. New badges are heavier, harder to forge. Some are split in two, half kept by the messenger, half by the recipient. Others are inscribed with personal names and routes, checked at major relay posts. The yam is a river of information, but it's also a security risk. The more vital it becomes, the more vulnerable it is. And still it runs. You drift next to a young Buddhist scholar from Tibet, granted free passage to the capital. He speaks of the yam as a kind of dharma, structured, balanced, inevitable. It is the horse that follows the middle path, he says, half smiling. But you feel something else too. A quiet urgency. The messages are faster, the riders more driven. There's more being asked of the system now, not just to maintain peace, but to anticipate conflict. You overhear one station host mention how the scrolls have grown heavier, longer decrees, more complex laws, tighter schedules. You begin to see messages carried not just on scrolls, but bound in booklets. Logbooks, spy reports, trade forecasts. The empire is not just sending orders now, it is gathering data, observing itself, becoming self-aware. At one eastern station, a rider arrives carrying medical samples, herbs and powders from a plague-struck village. They are bundled in waxed cloth, sealed with both administrative and medical emblems. The station clerk sets them aside gently, eyes downcast. Too many of these lately, he says. The yam carries hope, but it also carries warnings. And now, even the riders change. More of them are multilingual. Some have apprentices riding behind them, learning the routes. Others have full escort teams. You ride with a group of 5, 2 Mongols, 1 Persian, 1 Chinese, 1 Turkic. And you realize the yam is no longer just Mongol. It's imperial and it's evolving. At night in a station near Kashgar, you sit with a group of traders, clerks, and riders. No one speaks the same language fully, but everyone shares food. One of the traders pulls out a rough map, hand-drawn, lines crisscrossing from sea to sea. He points to the roads, the stations, the borders crossed in silence. This, he says, tapping the page, this is the safest road in the world. And for now, it is. Section 9. You find yourself walking beside a man with ink-stained fingers and eyes full of wonder. He's European, though his boots are caked in steppe dust and his hat is a local muck, a concession to the brutal sun. His name is Giovanni da Pian del Carpine, a Franciscan friar sent east by the Pope himself. He carries with him not only religious hopes, but a kind of mission report, a detailed account of what he sees, meant for kings and bishops back home. And what he sees most clearly, what astonishes him daily, is the yam. You ride with him for days, and he never stops taking notes. At each relay station, he measures distances, times rider changes, quizzes the hosts. He marvels that the horses are ready before the riders arrive. He watches scrolls handed off like sacred relics. It is a wonder, he murmurs more than once, how swiftly news flies in this heathen land. And he's not the only one. You step into the boots of another traveler, William of Rubruck, another Franciscan, curious, meticulous, and slightly less awed. He too moves through the yam, documenting the stations, the food, the climate, and the way even he, a foreigner, is treated with clinical efficiency by the relay clerks. His messages home are full of cautious admiration. They are not like us, he writes, but they are astonishing in their systems. You pass envoys from the Byzantine court, Russian emissaries, Venetian traders. All of them encounter the yam as something alien but impressive, an organized pulse in an otherwise unpredictable world. Many of them receive special Paisa badges to move freely, granted by the Great Khan or his representatives. These tokens become coveted, then imitated, then counterfeited. Soon the yam must upgrade again. The foreign visitors describe the yam with reverence. Its scale defies the memory of crumbling Roman roads and medieval courier systems riddled with bribes and delays. A message moving from one end of Europe to the other might take months, if it arrived at all. But here, from the Caspian to the Pacific, messages arrive with frightening consistency. You sit in a Persian merchant tent, watching as a German cartographer carefully sketches an updated map of Asia. He marks not just rivers and mountains, but yam stations. He draws them as dots, evenly spaced, crisscrossing empires. You ask why. He shrugs. If a thing stays put, I map it. If it moves quickly, I map how. You follow the messages they send home. Some are dry reports, others are gushing. A few describe the couriers themselves. Thin, silent, tireless, with eyes that seem always to look past the horizon. A few travelers try to keep pace with them, none succeed. Even Marco Polo, the most famous of all, speaks of the yam with admiration bordering on awe. He writes of thousands of horses, of guarded posts every 25 miles, of riders who can move faster than birds. Some of his details are inflated, perhaps even imagined, but the essence is true. He saw a system that worked better than anything in Europe, and he wanted the West to know. You drift beside a caravan that includes a few Mongol envoys on their way to Constantinople. They speak Turkish, Persian, Mongolian. One of them wears a crucifix. Another carries scrolls written in Syriac. They are products of this connected empire, and they travel like wind, fast, sure, guided by the stations. And the locals watch them pass. In a village on the Oxus, a boy runs beside a passing courier, eyes wide. The horse doesn't stop. The courier doesn't look down, but the boy grins anyway. They come like lightning, he tells you, and leave the world different. His father worked once as a host at an too, but left after injury. Still, the family keeps the leather water jugs by the door. Just in case, his mother says, you never know when the next rider needs help. You reach a point where the yam crosses into foreign territory not yet fully absorbed by the empire. Here, the relay system is tenuous, built with permission, not control. Even here, the system holds. Treaties have been signed. Local rulers have been bribed or coerced. The relay stations, while smaller, still function. You see Chinese couriers moving through Turkic lands. Persian scribes operating inside Slavic forests. This isn't just power, it's diplomacy on horseback. But admiration sometimes shades into fear. You overhear a Genoese ambassador whisper that the yam could be used to invade faster than any army in Europe could respond. They can strike, he says, before we know we've been struck. It's not just mail, in other words, it's mobility, its latency reduced to zero. And perhaps that's what most unsettles the West. Because in their minds, barbarians shouldn't have structure. Nomads shouldn't have schedules. Yet here it is. A nation of tents, managing a better post system than any cathedral-bound kingdom ever devised. You return briefly to one of the main arteries of the yam, watching foreign travelers ride beside Mongol officials, everyone guided by the same invisible contract: speed, clarity, precision. No one speaks of it, they just participate, and maybe that's the greatest testament, that strangers, sworn enemies, and wandering friars alike begin to trust the system. Not because they understand it, but because it works. Section 10, the horizon turns a bruised purple as you follow a lone rider through a cold dusk. His horse moves at a steady lope, ribs visible, breath steaming. The rider slumps slightly in the saddle, not injured, just exhausted. You've seen this before. The yam never stops, but the people running it do eventually. And lately you've begun to notice it more often. Signs that the machine is running hot. Maybe too hot. At this station the fire is low and the groom is missing. The replacement horse is lean, favoring one leg. The host's face is tight. We had no barley shipment this month, he mutters, almost to himself. The next one was robbed before reaching us. He doesn't ask questions when the rider passes through, just nods and records the time. You feel the tension in the air like a tent rope pulled too taut. These are the ghost riders. Not literally spectral, but they might as well be pale, hollow-eyed men who push too far, skip rest, take extra shifts. Some do it out of duty, others out of desperation. A few have families to support, and the relay wages, once decent, have become stagnant. You speak to a rider who hasn't seen his children in months. He shrugs. If I stop, someone else takes the saddle. Might as well be me. You begin to see patterns, stations operating with reduced staff, fewer horses per post, worn-out gear. Messages still get through, but just barely. The timings slip, imperceptibly at first. A message that should take 4 days takes 5. A report arrives missing a signature, nothing major. Yet, you walk through a station whose roof leaks rainwater onto the storage chest. Inside, scrolls are wrapped in oiled cloth, but the damage shows. A few seals are soft, warped. The clerk, younger than most, clearly doesn't understand the weight of what he's handling. It's not war orders, he says with a shrug, just a trade license. That trade license, of course, might govern a caravan of 40 men and 3 months of labor. But the disconnect is spreading. You ride with a group of riders heading back east for reassignment. They speak in clipped phrases, sharing little. One of them coughs persistently, deep and wet. He carries no medicine. The others keep a polite distance. You ask what happened to their last station. Burned, one says, by locals, something about taxes. He doesn't elaborate. The yam has begun to sag under its own weight. As the empire stretches thinner, so do the resources. Funding is still allocated, but slower. Supply caravans, once predictable, now go missing or arrive late. The response from the central administration is to write more rules, issue more orders, but those too must travel by courier. And sometimes the orders contradict. You sit with an aging station host who's been managing his post for 30 years. He shows you his ledgers, pages once tidy, now stained and crammed with marginalia. They doubled our range, he tells you. Cut our supplies, we're now covering 2 stations' territory. He smiles wryly. Efficiency. But not all the decay is material, some is moral. You hear of riders who rent out their horses for side travel or use empty saddlebags to carry black market goods. One courier was caught ferrying stolen jewelry in a scroll tube. Another forged a paisa to smuggle contraband across provincial borders. Not widespread, but enough that the rumors now ride faster than the horses. At one post, a senior clerk keeps a locked trunk beneath his sleeping mat. Inside are 2 sets of seals, one official, one imitation. You don't ask questions, neither does anyone else. As long as the messages arrive and the scrolls are sealed, few seem to care how it happens. You visit a relay outside Tabriz, once pristine, now pocked with mud and neglect. The riders there move without urgency, taking long breaks. One complains openly, "Why rush? They won't notice." He's probably right. The central court has become bloated, distant. The Khan's voice, once instant, now arrives dulled by repetition. And yet even now the yam functions. It limps, it wheezes, but it moves. That's the paradox. The brilliance of the system is also its flaw. It was built to move messages across hostile, wild territory, but now the hostility is internal. Corruption, neglect, fatigue. The roads are still there, the horses still run, but the soul of the system, the pride, the discipline, is fading in too many places. You speak to a young courier in northern China. He's just joined the system. His uniform is new, his horse clean. He believes in the yam. It's the Khan's breath, he says, his will in motion. You nod, but behind him the station roof has collapsed, and the logbook is 2 weeks out of date. The ghost riders keep moving, but more and more they ride with eyes downcast, legs trembling. The posts remain lit at night, but some fires flicker lower than others. Horses are thinner. Routes take longer. It still looks like a machine. But you know better now. It's become a ghost of itself. And in the silence between stations, you can almost hear it groaning. Section 11. You step into a relay station on the edge of the Gobi, and it takes you a moment to realize what's missing. The walls stand, the posts are intact, but the fire is cold. The feed bins are empty. No groom greets you. The only sound is the dry flap of a torn banner, still bearing the mark of the yam. This station hasn't been used in weeks, maybe longer, and it isn't the only one. You begin to track the pattern across the map. A route in the Alborz Mountains, now diverts south due to a landslide that was never cleared. A station in the Fergana Valley has been shut indefinitely after a local governor failed to pay his quota of horses. Another post on the southern edge of the Caspian has changed hands twice in a single year, both times due to theft and disputes over the Pisa system. The yam is still breathing, but it's coughing blood. You speak with a clerk in bulk who used to work in Karakoram. He tells you how, not long ago, the Central Court would send inspection teams to assess relay efficiency, check scroll accuracy, even verify ink quality. They don't come anymore, he says flatly. We're too far and they have their own problems. You follow the cracks further, watching as entire provinces begin to act more independently. Governors hold up scrolls for review before passing them on. Some demand copies of every message that crosses their border. Others delay documents on purpose, using bureaucracy as a shield against oversight. The yam was built on trust, but trust doesn't survive fragmentation. You drift beside a Mongol envoy trying to deliver orders to a regional commander. The courier is stopped twice by local patrols, questioned about the origin of the message, and forced to show not just his Pisa, but a secondary confirmation scroll. It used to be one seal, he mutters. One seal and the whole road opened. Now it's layers of approval. Layers that slow, layers that choke. You notice a shift in the tone of the scrolls too. Once brisk and confident, they're now long-winded, filled with justification and repetition. As if the writers no longer trust the readers, as if the message alone is no longer enough to carry authority. Even the format is bloating. Where one scroll sufficed, now 3 are sent. One for the court, one for the local copy, one as backup. You watch a rider strap them carefully to his chest and shake his head. They don't trust the air between the stations anymore, he says. Corruption finds its wedge in the system. Not loud, not explosive, just quiet erosion. Station hosts begin selling favors, offering merchants priority horse changes for a bribe. Riders take on side work, delivering personal letters for tips. You pass a clerk who keeps 2 ledgers, one for the empire, one for his pocket. When you ask him how long he's done this, he doesn't flinch. Since the tax collector stopped showing up, he says, we all have to eat. The Khan's voice, once thunder on the horizon, now arrives as a rumor. You listen as village elders dispute the authenticity of a scroll. It says reinforcements are coming, one says, but we heard the southern road is broken. No one knows what to believe. You look down at the message. The seal is clean, but the paper is water damaged. You realize how quickly the empire's confidence frays without reliable words. And then the violence comes. Not invasion, yet, but resistance. In the Ilkhanate, in the Chagatai realm, in fractured Yuan China. Local rulers begin taxing the yam directly, squeezing it for revenue. When protests rise, riders are detained. Scrolls are opened without authorization. In some provinces, entire relay lines vanish overnight, repurposed for military or personal use. You see a station once used for emergency military messages, now housing a noble's hunting lodge. The horses wear decorative silk, but they no longer run. The decline isn't immediate, it's uneven. Some sections of the yam still operate like clockwork, but others resemble ruins. You follow a broken route in the Caucasus, now nothing more than sun-bleached paths and collapsed markers. A shepherd walks part of it, not knowing it once carried royal decrees. And amid all this, a strange desperation enters the system. Riders are instructed to take detours around collapsed stations. Some are given alternative scrolls with similar but not identical orders in case one is lost. You hear of a governor in eastern China who sent 5 duplicate messages by 5 separate routes. Only one arrived. He never learned what happened to the others. You return briefly to Karakoram, now quieter than it used to be. The yam administration offices remain, but they echo. Fewer scribes, fewer horses in the outer yards. The map on the central wall still glows with red pins marking active stations. But you know better. Many of those pins are just habit, places that haven't been confirmed in months, maybe years. And through it all, the riders still ride, the stations still flicker with life, but the cracks in the paper are growing. The ink runs. The silence between messages stretches longer. The yam hasn't failed, but it's no longer unquestioned. And once belief starts to slip, systems built on faith begin to fade. Section 12. The wind shifts as you ride into a valley that once thrived on the pulse of the yam. Now it feels hollow, like a husk of something that used to matter. The station ahead is still manned, but the host no longer rises when a rider approaches. There's no urgency, no sharp call for water or feed. Just a tired wave, a muttered greeting, and silence. You can feel it in your bones. The decline has become something more than fatigue. It's indifference. Resistance is rising. In the West, across parts of Persia and the fractured Ilkhanate, governors have begun openly repurposing relay routes for their own use. Scrolls from rival Khans pile up at checkpoints, held for days, sometimes weeks. The yam was never meant to pick sides, but now it's caught in the middle of dynastic disputes, factional infighting, and splintered loyalties. You pass through the Tarim Basin, once a critical artery between China and the rest of the empire. Now, riders carry dual instructions, one from the Yuan court, another from a regional lord demanding oversight of all imperial orders. A courier shakes his head as he unrolls both documents. "Which one do I obey?" he asks. You have no answer. The yam was built on coherence, on the principle that a single voice, a single seal, could command an entire world. But that world is fragmenting. Now you see it daily. One court claims sovereignty, another contradicts it. Scrolls are amended mid-route, orders rescinded by regional command before they even arrive at their destination. In the heartland of the Chagatai Khanate, the road you follow has been torn apart by raiders. Not foreign enemies, locals, farmers, mercenaries, former station workers turned bandits. They don't just steal horses, they burn scrolls. They rip down the banners that once marked the yam as sacred. You stop at a station that was overrun 3 nights ago. The groom was spared only because he hid under the feed bins. The rest of the staff fled into the hills. In the south, near Delhi, rival dynasties have begun targeting yam infrastructure directly. Relay posts are now considered soft targets. Riders are harassed, their paisa badges confiscated or mocked. You hear a tale of one station that sent out its final rider at dawn, only for him to be returned that evening, headless, scroll unopened. At one desert relay point, the host tells you plainly, "No more messages come through here." You ask why. "Because they're not worth dying for," he says. And still, despite the danger, the system sputters forward, because even rebellion needs communication. Governors build their own copycat yams, shorter, less disciplined, but functional. Private systems emerge, run by mercantile guilds or noble clans. Some of them still use Mongol horses, some use former Yamchi. The knowledge hasn't disappeared, only the unity. You follow a splinter network built by a regional warlord in Anatolia. The stations look familiar, same spacing, same routine, but the insignia are different. The scrolls bear his seal. When asked about the imperial yam, a clerk laughs. "Old road," he says, "this is the new one." In northern China, even the Yuan court's yam is riddled with politics. You watch as an imperial rider is delayed not by roads or weather, but by bureaucrats arguing over whose desk a message should pass through first. The seal is still intact when it arrives, but the content is days old and outdated. The riders know this. They feel it. You sit beside one who's been in the service for 12 years. He carries 3 scrolls, each bound in a different color. Same route, he says, 3 different masters. When you ask what happens if the orders contradict, he shrugs. "I deliver. It's not my fight." The pride is gone. Where once they rode with the force of empire at their backs, now they ride for pay, for duty, for habit. The fire in their eyes has dimmed. Some even laugh when they speak of the glory days. Others refuse to speak at all. And yet, in small pockets, resistance to collapse emerges. A few governors remain loyal to the old order. They keep their stations funded, their horses fresh. You stop at one such post, and it's like stepping back in time. The feed is clean, the records sharp, the scrolls sealed with care. The host greets you with the old salute, palm over chest. The message moves, he says, even if the world forgets it. But these outposts are isolated, islands in a rising sea. In the capital, the leadership debates reforms, more inspections, stricter punishments, streamlined hierarchies. But the court is bloated, distracted by foreign threats and internal intrigue. Scrolls arrive with bold declarations, but the riders delivering them often laugh because they know the stations receiving them no longer exist. At a fractured post near the Aral Sea, a clerk shows you a sealed scroll that's been sitting on his shelf for 6 weeks. No rider will take it, he says. Too far, too risky. You ask what he'll do with it. He shrugs. Wait until someone stronger comes along. And that is the new order. Wait, watch, survive. The yam has not fallen, but it has become reactive, not proactive. A once mighty web now limping along a few surviving strands. You ride under stars that once watched over a living system. Now they shine on ruins, on riders who no longer believe, on hosts who fear their own neighbors, on messages that mean less with every mile they travel. Section 13. The wind that once carried the sounds of hooves now carries only dust. You stand on a hill overlooking what was once a relay outpost near the Sir Daria. The fences have collapsed, the corral lies empty, and the post's flagpole leans broken at the shoulder. Somewhere inside the shell of the old station, a half-rotted saddle rests on the floor beside a mold-stained ledger. The yam didn't die all at once, but here you can feel its silence. You walk the length of a broken road, a road that once stitched east to west in clean arcs of purpose. Now it's broken, interrupted by washed-out bridges, razed towns and checkpoints manned by soldiers from factions you can no longer identify. At one such crossing, a rider pleads to pass. His paisa is intact, but the commander sneers. That badge holds no weight here, he says, and sends the man away on foot. Collapse doesn't look like fire and chaos. It looks like delay, like confusion, like repetition with no answer. You follow a scroll that was meant for a court in Bukhara. It travels 3 days out, is rejected at a station with no clerk, then returns. It's handed off again a week later, makes it 1 station further, then returns once more. This time unopened, dusty, brittle. Messages now circle like vultures with no place to land. And the Empire knows it. You see it in their faces. In Karakoram, the message halls still operate, but the scribes have grown slower. The ink, once clean, now smudges. The orders come with footnotes, apologies, clarifications, amendments. You read one that begins with a military decree, ends with a personal plea. If the road south is impassable, send word by sea, or failing that, by prayer. You return to a northern post you visited long ago. Back then, the horses were strong, the riders lean and eager. Now the stable is filled with goats. The station has become a farm. The old station host waves as you pass, not unkind, but detached. We wait for nothing now, he says, and that is easier. You drift southward through towns where yam markers have been torn down and replaced with local sigils, symbols of new powers, new fiefdoms. Some still use pieces of the old system, the spacing, the infrastructure, even the terminology. But they aren't the yam. They're fragments, imitations playing at authority, disconnected from the web that once bound them. The couriers have scattered. Some sell their skills to mercenary bands, others retire, living off modest pensions if they're lucky. You meet one former Yamchi working as a guide in Kashgar, bitter and sun-worn. He used to carry messages for the Khan himself. Now he carries baggage. The letters meant something, he mutters, until no one listened anymore. And yet, there are still riders. You see them now and then, cutting lonely figures on shrinking paths. They ride out of habit, out of stubbornness. At a post in the west, a courier arrives with a scroll he's carried for 12 days. The clerk opens it, reads it silently, and nods. This order was cancelled last month, he says. The rider doesn't react, just takes water and sits down, staring at the fire. You pass through one of the final intact east-west arteries, one of the last functioning yam corridors linking China to the edge of Central Asia. Even here, it's tenuous. The stations are garrisoned. Messages are inspected before and after transit. Every scroll bears 2 seals now, one imperial, one regional. Mistrust rides beside every horse. At night, you lie beneath fraying tents beside riders who no longer speak of the future. They speak of other trades, of family lands, of safe towns to retire in. The yam, they say, has become a relic, something people respect out of nostalgia, not function. You sit with a scholar who once helped design the route maps. He pulls out a faded chart, hundreds of stations marked in red. Most are now crossed out. "We thought it would last forever," he says, but forever only lasts until people stop believing. And the final silence begins in pockets. A station that's skipped for a day, then 3, then a week. A scroll that's never delivered, but no one notices. A rider who never returns. Eventually the gap grows too wide, the line breaks, and the silence becomes permanent. One day a station receives no messages, none the next day either. The riders wait, but nothing comes. After a week, the clock stops recording. After 2, the horses are sold. The 3rd week, the fire isn't lit, and the station becomes something else, a home, a ruin, a memory. You return to the edge of the steppe, where it all began. You stand on the same hill where Genghis once looked out and imagined a connected world. The wind is the same. The sky is wide, but now there are no riders, no banners, just grass, endless and empty. And you understand something very old, that systems, no matter how vast, how clever, how brilliant, only survive as long as the people running them believe in their purpose. The yam fell not with fire, but with silence. Section 14. The silence lingers like fog across the plains, broken only by the wind threading through broken station gates and rusting saddles. You walk beside a historian now, many years after the yam has faded from active memory. He dusts off old maps, traces paths long erased by erosion and war, and shakes his head. "They say the Mongols had no culture," he mutters. "But this," he taps the route lines, "this was architecture, made of riders, not stone." And echoes, it turns out, have long shadows. You follow him to a provincial archive in Anatolia, where scribes still use routing logs modelled loosely after the yam. The distances are shorter now, the horse is gone, but the bones remain. Spacing, accountability, transit stations. Even the phrase "ertu" has lingered in the regional dialect, warped but familiar. This isn't the Mongol yam, the clerk tells you, but it remembers it. You drift east into Muscovy, where Tsars once trembled beneath Mongol tribute demands. Now they build their own postal service, state-run, militarized. Riders wear uniforms. The stations are fortified. They call it their own system, but the skeleton underneath still resembles the yam. Fixed distances, sealed messages, networked authority. You watch as a courier departs Moscow with 3 dispatches. His route overlaps a line that once bore the seal of Batu Khan. In Persia, the Ilkhanate gone but not forgotten, merchant guilds adopt fragments of the yam's former glory. Stations now serve caravans more than messages, but the rhythm is familiar. Grooms, logs, scheduled stops. You speak to a merchant who grew up hearing tales of the yam. "My grandfather saw a scroll change a city's fate," he says. "We trust our ledgers for the same reason. Speed means survival." Even in the Middle East, where Mongol influence ebbed quickly after the fall of the Ilkhanate, pieces of the system resurface. A Mamluk administrator in Cairo, tasked with coordinating distant forts, implements a simplified post relay after hearing of Mongol methods. It lacks the elegance of the yam, but it moves orders 10 times faster than before. Word spreads. In the West, the idea germinates slowly. Marco Polo's accounts of the Mongol postal system find an audience. So do the writings of Rubruk and Carpini. European courts, skeptical at first, begin to experiment with royal couriers, relay networks, coded permissions. You watch as French king's test rider shifts every 20 kilometers. Borrowed knowingly or not from the old yam model. The seed has taken root, centuries pass. And then, in the New World, a new name, the Pony Express. You stand beside its early developers, poring over records of Mongol relay systems. They openly cite their inspiration. Riders, relay posts, sealed documents, stations every 10 miles. "We're not inventing it," one engineer admits, "we're rediscovering it." You smile at the symmetry, that across continents and centuries, in a land Genghis never dreamed of, His ghost rides again. But the most enduring echo is subtler. You see it in modern logistics. In the basic principle of a relay, don't carry one thing too far. Just carry it fast and pass it on. The Mongols didn't have engines. They didn't have railways or telegraphs. But they understood throughput, latency, and trust. Lessons that still hum under the skin of every functioning delivery network. You walk with a Turkish postal official examining old caravan routes. He shows you how some modern roads mirror ancient yam lines. They knew the land, he says, knew how to keep a man moving. Later, he points to a weathered stone, barely legible. The inscription is Mongolian, the symbol above it unmistakable. An early paisa. We still carry permits, he says, stamped, not engraved. But the idea is older than any of us. Not all the legacies are mechanical. The yam left cultural footprints too. You visit a museum in Ulaanbaatar where the uniforms of ancient Yamchi are preserved, stiff leather coats, wind-worn caps, badges etched with curling script. The school children stare at them like they're sacred. One little girl tugs your sleeve. They carried the Khan's voice, she says. You nod. And who carries yours? She points at her tablet. The connection is clear. Even in language, the yam lingers. In Mongolian idioms about speed. In Persian phrases about certainty. In Russian terms for checkpoints. In Chinese proverbs about messages riding wind. No empire lasts forever, but ideas, especially useful ones, migrate quietly, embed themselves, and refuse to die. And in all of it, you find one shared principle, not speed for speed's sake, but movement with meaning. A message that arrives not just quickly, but faithfully, cleanly, and with respect. That was the soul of the yam. You walk a final stretch of forgotten road in Central Asia, barely visible among wild grass, no markers, no travelers. But for a moment, you think you hear something, just beneath the wind. A hoofbeat, a whispered phrase, the thrum of an empire that refused to let distance be an excuse. And then it's gone. Section 15. The wind is colder now. It carries with it not the urgency of a rider in full gallop, nor the soft hum of messages in motion, but the slower breath of time slipping over old ground. You're walking through the dust of memory, the fading outline of a relay route near Karakoram. There's no sign left, not a post, not a wall, but somehow you know where the station once stood. It's in the rhythm of the land, in the way the grass parts, in the way your boots land a little too evenly, as though retracing forgotten hoofbeats. You bend down, running your hand through the coarse earth. A splinter of shaped wood, barely the size of your thumb, emerges. Perhaps a fragment of a marker post. Or maybe nothing at all. But here, everything feels like it might have been something. Because the yam left no grand monuments. It didn't need them. The empire it served was motion. Its memorial is the absence where it once moved. You follow the old line westward again, as if the story could somehow be retold by walking it backward. The posts that were, the riders who passed, the messages carried through flood and fire, through rebellion and ice. It's quiet now. Too quiet. You pass a herd of wild horses grazing near a hollow where a station might have been. They don't spook. They've forgotten the system that once pressed them into service. Or maybe they remember in their bones, in the instinct to run when asked, to move when told. Every so often, you find the bones of the yam, not human, not tragic, just structural, a rusted hinge, a flat stone worn by repetitive human hands, a piece of iron harness. At a low ravine, you find a dugout. It might have been a fire pit. Might have been a message chest, buried for protection and never retrieved. You don't dig it up. The past doesn't need rescuing, it needs remembering. And so you keep walking. You pass shepherds who've never heard the word yam. You speak to a trader who swears he can feel the ghosts of the old system when he rides certain routes. You sit with a boy whose grandfather once claimed to have found an intact scroll case in the riverbank. He never opened it. Said some things aren't meant for curious hands. Said some things still carry weight, even after the words have faded. Night falls on a stretch of the steppe that feels unchanged in 1,000 years. The stars wheel above you in familiar silence. This, you realize, is the same sky the Yamchi rode beneath. Same chill, same wind, same thread of silence stretching from one life to another. You lie back and listen for hooves that will never come. And still, you almost expect them. Because the Yam never needed permanence. It was always temporary, always in flux. It wasn't built to last, it was built to move. And in its movement, it did something greater than most empires ever manage. It stitched lives together. It delivered words that altered the course of cities, courts, armies, and histories. It made the impossible distances between people seem smaller, at least for a little while. And for a time, it worked. You picture one of the last riders, the final true Yamchi, stepping down at a crumbling station, scroll still sealed. No one to receive it, no one to log the stop. Maybe he reads it aloud to himself, then burns it. Maybe he buries it in a can. Maybe he keeps riding, not because of orders, but because it's all he's ever known. Then you see nothing, only dust and stars, and a road no one walks anymore. The Yam is gone, but it leaves behind something the empire couldn't destroy with its fall. A memory of connection, a system built on faith and rhythm and sweat, a pulse that, for a while, made the world smaller and more knowable. And when the wind picks up again, it sounds just faintly like hooves. Now let the road fade behind you. You've walked long enough, followed the riders across rivers, deserts, forests, and time. You've seen what they built, a world bound together not by walls or monuments, but by simple movement. You've listened to their quiet endurance, their stubborn faith in the idea that a message could shape a nation. But all that is behind you now. Close your eyes. Let the hum of hooves dissolve into the soft rhythm of your own breath. Let the names, Karakoram, Samarkand, Khanbalik, melt away into the dark, leaving only stillness. The stations are quiet. The scrolls have all been read. The horses have gone home. Now imagine you're lying beneath a wool blanket in one of those ancient stations, fire crackling low, walls muffling the wind. Outside, the steppe is endless, but here you are warm, safe, unmoving, a small flicker of peace in a world that used to run at the speed of thought. Nothing else is needed now, no more messages, no more waiting. The last light dims, the past goes quiet, and still something in the dark listens, just in case the road stirs again.